So Dricus Du Plessis suffered an injury in his fight with Whittaker, and he is not ready to turn around to fight in September against Israel Adesanya. And now Israel Adesanya is calling out Sean Strickland to step up and take Dricus Du Plessis' spot in September in Australia for the Middleweight World Championship. And also Umar Nurmagomedov has pulled out of his fight with Sandhagen, and I don't know who's going to fill in for Umar Nurmagomedov. So we're going to talk about both of these situations in today's MMA news reaction video. Let's start straight away with Dricus Du Plessis, injured in his fight against Whittaker. He's hurt his foot. He's not going to be ready to make the turnaround in 8 weeks. And although I was having some wishful thinking here to hope that maybe Dricus Du Plessis would be ready to fight Israel Adesanya in September, this was absolutely a possibility from the get-go. I said this a very long time ago. If I actually said Whittaker was going to beat Du Plessis, but I also said that Whittaker was going to beat Du Plessis, but regardless, the winner of that matchup is not going to be ready to fight for the belt unless Dricus makes it look easy by first round KO. But Dricus, of course, went into the second round. He took a few kicks. He took a few shots. He threw a few shots. I'm imagining he landed a kick on Whittaker's forearm or leg or something that hurt his foot. So now Sean Strickland is stepping up. I called that this was a possibility, and the possibility has come true. So well done, Sean Strickland. You got what you wanted, and you now have your chance to fight for the Middleweight World Championship in September, and this is going to be an absolutely crazy build-up. Of course, I am so sad about the fact that we are not going to be seeing Adesanya versus Du Plessis. I feel like that would have been one of the biggest fights of the year, 100%. The build-up would have made that an absolutely massive fight. But at the end of the day, Israel Adesanya, this is what happens. You're going to lose your opponent if you do try and set up a situation where they have to turn around and fight 8 weeks after their fight that they just had against a top contender. You know what I mean? This was always going to happen. There was always a chance of this happening, at least. We were all hoping that maybe Dricus would come out of that fight completely unscathed, with no injuries and no soreness whatsoever. But this was always a possibility, and it's happened. You know what I mean? He was trying to make Dricus Du Plessis turn around 8 weeks later, after just taking on a #1 contender in Whittaker and going through a training camp for that. Israel Adesanya did the same thing to Marvin Vettori, if you remember. He took on Marvin Vettori after Marvin Vettori just, I believe, went 5 rounds with Kevin Holland in a fight night main event. All of a sudden, 7 weeks later, he takes on Israel Adesanya for the belt. So they tried to sort of rush Du Plessis to get right back in there because, of course, they had the date set in September, and they were trying to make sure that they could make that matchup happen, and they have to have Adesanya on that card, because if Volkanovski can't fight on the Australia card and Whittaker's not going to be fighting on the Australia card, they've got to have some kind of Australian themed champion to have on that card. I know Israel Adesanya's from New Zealand, but still, this is the situation that we're now in. Israel Adesanya, Sean Strickland, and this is it. We don't get what we want. We don't get Israel Adesanya, Dricus Du Plessis. I'm not going to be hard on Dricus Du Plessis here. I think there's a lot of people that are going to say, what a coward. He didn't really want that smoke. He didn't just beat Whittaker by second round KO. If anyone's really going to say something like Dricus Du Plessis is ducking Israel Adesanya because he doesn't want to fight him or he's scared he's going to lose, he just fought Whittaker and beat him, and now he's just not ready. Of course he wants to fight for the belt, but I'm assuming that he wants to fight for the belt in really good circumstances, not trying to nurse through an injury for his entire training camp, because if he really has hurt his foot, most injuries like that, minor injuries, are going to take 6-8 weeks to recover. So he's just going to be sort of trying to stay in shape, and then hopefully by the time fight day comes around, his foot's no longer hurting him. So maybe he's broken his foot. Maybe it's a minor injury that's only going to take a few weeks, but he just didn't want to go right back into training camp and risk injuring it again. And maybe he just wants to be in good condition for when he does fight Israel Adesanya, because let's be real, it was a bit of an unfair circumstance for both Whittaker and Du Plessis. You know what I mean? They're all all these middleweight contenders are kind of being forced to play to the beat of Israel Adesanya's drum, where he sort of gets what he wants, and they have to make quick turnarounds after they've just been through a training camp and a fight. And I know that we say, and Israel Adesanya was saying, not him and not Volk, we're ready to make quick turnarounds. Not 8 weeks later. You know what I mean? Not as a champion. You're being active by fighting 3 times a year, once every 4 months, maybe 3 months if you're being extremely active. 8 weeks is a different ball game, especially when you just took on Whittaker and went into the second round and took some shots in that fight. You know, if Du Plessis won by first 10 seconds KO and just immediately cracked Whittaker, this would be a different situation. But he did get a bit scrappy. There were some moments in that fight, so it's understandable as to why he's pulled out of it, even though the fight was never made in the first place. I actually think this might be for the best, because this way we get 2 title defenses guaranteed for Israel Adesanya against fresh opponents. And remember the problem we were having not too long ago. There was no fresh opponent for Israel Adesanya. So now not only do we get Israel Adesanya versus Sean Strickland, who just had a great performance against Nurmagomedov and is a huge name, and he's been talking a ton of trash on the Joe Rogan Experience against about Israel Adesanya as well. He's going to build up the fight. And then we also get Dricus Du Plessis, who, regardless of when he fights for the belt, is guaranteed to definitely fight for the belt next. I mean, he's number 1 right now in the middleweight division in the rankings, I believe. He's earned his title shot regardless, so this means we get to see an even more active Israel Adesanya, because the worry was, if Israel Adesanya beats Dricus Du Plessis and they make another matchup with Strickland or another matchup with another contender that could possibly fight for the belt, we might not see Israel Adesanya until like April or May of 2024. But this way, we could possibly see Israel Adesanya fight Strickland in September, and then who knows, maybe because of the delay of the time, we might get the UFC Africa in 2024 between Adesanya and Du Plessis in South Africa or in Nigeria. This opens up a whole new ball game of options for what they want to do with that fight, rather than limiting it to have to be in Australia and have to be in 8 weeks. And I also believe that separating this fight a little bit longer and letting it brew a little bit more is only going to make this a bigger fight. Because, you know, if Israel Adesanya beats Sean Strickland, and even in the build-up to his fight with Sean Strickland, he's going to be really trash-talking Dricus Du Plessis about this, calling him a coward, calling him this, calling him that, because he didn't turn around 7.5 weeks after he was done with Whittaker, or 8 weeks after he was done with Whittaker, whatever the maths is, however many weeks it was. I feel like it's only going to be a bigger fight, because if he beats Strickland, that post-fight speech, he gets to make a direct call out to Dricus Du Plessis and build this even more. And then, if he wins in September and doesn't take damage against Strickland, 3 months after that is December, and we might see Adesanya back again this year. So I think this is good. It guarantees 2 fresh new opponents for Adesanya in the new year, or in this year, or coming up, moving forward. We get 2 fresh opponents, and the rest of the division can work itself out and try and find a natural next contender for like late 2024, which gives us a ton of time to work things out, because I just heard that Khamzat Chimaev's fighting Paulo Costa. Dana White just announced it. I'm going to have to make that video tomorrow because it's 10 past 4 a.m. Israel Adesanya is going to beat Sean Strickland. Simple as that. I think this gives Dricus a higher chance of beating Israel Adesanya. I'll be honest. I think this is good for Dricus. I think it's good for the competitiveness of the matchup. I think there would always be that asterisk of, did Dricus pick up an injury in his fight with Whittaker? Is he entirely ready to go 8 weeks later after fighting a number 1 contender? Now, all of those excuses are removed, and we get to see the best Dricus show up to fight Israel Adesanya whenever they do have that contest. But in the meantime, let's face it, Israel Adesanya is going to be fighting Sean Strickland. You know what I mean? And he's going to beat him. Let's face it. That's what I meant to say, rather than he's going to be fighting him. He's going to beat Sean Strickland. I think it's one of the easiest matchups you could possibly have for Israel Adesanya in September. Sean Strickland, he's not going to win. And he's going to make a great build-up. He's going to insult Adesanya beyond belief. He's going to make it really fun. He's going to make it sell a bunch of pay-per-views. He's going to have a great press conference. He's going to verbally ridicule Israel Adesanya in the build-up and make him look like a fool. And it's going to sell a ton. But at the end of the day, Sean Strickland is going to walk forward and try and throw jabs and twos against Israel Adesanya. I don't think it's going to work. I just don't see it working, Sean. Maybe he surprises everyone and mixes in some grappling, because he does have some really good grappling. But I thought he was going to use that against Alex Pereira. So I'm done betting on him to do that. because he doesn't use his grappling too often. He's got great takedown defense. You saw that against Abus. He got taken down there, worked his way back up. He mixes in takedowns well with his game. Bisping told a story before about how they were sparring on the feet in a striking match, and Sean Strickland was talking about how much better his grappling is compared to his striking. So maybe Strickland could make this interesting if he does choose to grapple, but I reckon he's going to walk forward, fling his arms out there, try and land jabs and twos, and I just think the leg kicks are way too open for him. If you rewatch his fight with Brendan Allen, and even watch parts of his fight with Cannonier, the leg kicks are still open. Now, he's not terrible at defending them. He does check some of them, but Israel Adesanya, even if you're checking leg kicks against lower middleweight contenders, that's not saying you're going to check him against Israel Adesanya, because he sets them up way differently. They're a way different level of speed and technique. I think he's going to get his leg chewed up. I think he's going to start limping on it. And I think Israel Adesanya is going to find a KO at some point. It may be in round 2 or 3. I couldn't design a less chance fighter to beat Israel Adesanya in the top 10 than Sean Strickland, to be honest with you. I love Sean Strickland. I hope he wins. But I just don't think it's going to happen. I think this is going to be basically a free defense for Adesanya. He should make this look easy. And if he does, let's get that quick turnaround for him versus Du Plessis. And that would be real interesting. And then we can get a real, fully prepared, no injuries, no just been through a fight with Whittaker in a training camp for it, Du Plessis. He's going to be fully ready to go. And there's going to be no excuses or no asterisks in the build up to that fight to talk about by the time that matchup eventually happens. And who knows, maybe Strickland shows us some things by getting a takedown at one moment or getting a takedown or two that maybe could make us think that Du Plessis could actually beat him. So this is a good fight to have in the meantime to keep the division busy and to keep that card good in September. And I think this is a great build up to happen. We move on to another bit of news. Corey Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. It's not just that Umar Nurmagomedov pulled out of this fight, which is what we're going to talk about, and we're also going to try and find another opponent for Corey Sandhagen. It's not just that Umar pulled out of this fight, okay? 3 Dagestanis pulled out of this fight, which I think is weird, okay? Because we had Umar Nurmagomedov pulled off the card. We also just had Saeed Nurmagomedov pulled off the card. And last week, we had Tagir Ulanbekov pulled off the card. So it's pretty unlucky whatever's going around over there. Maybe they all got injured individually. Maybe there's like a collective visa issue because of what's, they're from Russia. So there's going to be some potential visa issues based on the fact that what we just saw about Russia saying they're going to double down after that bridge situation that just went on. So maybe there is a bit of a connection there rather than just all of them getting individual injuries. I know some people are saying Umar injured his shoulder, but maybe they're just trying to sort of hide the real reason why they don't want him to fight, or they don't want him to leave Russia and have visa problems, and maybe they can't get him into the US. So we're going to have to find a new opponent for Corey Sandhagen, and I don't know who it's going to be. What I would recommend doing, honestly, is finding a replacement for Marlon Vera instead, and then doing Corey Sandhagen versus Pedro Munoz. It's the only option. Merab Dvalishvili is injured. Sean O'Malley is fighting Aljamain Sterling. Henry Cejudo is injured. Piotr ain't fighting this year. He's just changed camps, and he had an eye injury after his Merab fight. It was completely swollen shut, so he's going to need some time off. Sandhagen just beat Vera and dominated him, even though it was a split decision, which is crazy to say. Just shows you how bad judging is. Rob Font's fighting Song Yudong. Dominic Cruz is fighting Davison Figueiredo. Maybe they could get Dominic Cruz in there against Sandhagen, but I don't know if I want to see that. At this point in Dominic Cruz's career, him rushing for a short notice fight with Sandhagen. I don't think Figueiredo's going to be ready and bulked up to 135 enough to take on Sandhagen, but maybe they could do that, but then that would also leave Cruz with no one. I guess maybe you could do Cruz versus a Yanez or something. But outside of those options, it's kind of got to be Corey Sandhagen versus Jonathan Martinez, who's ranked number 15. And that is a completely less than ideal situation, to say the least. I reckon what they should do, if I was in charge of the UFC, I'd say, hey, Marlon Vera, I know we said you're fighting Pedro Munoz, but Munoz, he's coming off a win over Chris Gutierrez. We're going to do him versus Sandhagen, because if Munoz is ready to fight on the August pay-per-view, I imagine he's going to be ready to fight in Nashville. And also, that's a better fight for Munoz. It's actually a higher jump up the rankings, seeing as Sandhagen just beat Vera. So I think he'd be more willing to fight Sandhagen than he would be Vera. So I think they should do Corey Sandhagen versus Pedro Munoz as a main event. It's a weak main event, I know, but it's the best we've got right now. And then they do Marlon Vera versus an Adrian Yanez, a Ricky Simone, a Chris Gutierrez, or a Jonathan Martinez on the main card of that August pay-per-view. That's what I think they should do in the bantamweight division. But it sucks for Umar Nurmagomedov. He's pulled out of a fight. I just think it's a little bit weird how all three of the Russian guys are off the card within the space of a week, pretty much. I can't remember how long ago Tagir Ulanbekov pulled out against Jake Hadley on that card, but I'm pretty sure it was like last week. It can't have been much longer away than that. Tagir pulls out the card, the flyweight guy from Team Habib. Saeed Nurmagomedov pulls out the card. I know he's not Team Habib, but he's from a similar region and training area, and I'm sure they've done some cross-training before. Saeed Nurmagomedov pulls out today. And then earlier today, Umar Nurmagomedov pulls out. So I'm not trying to say they all like messed up their cycle and now they're off the card. That's not why I'm suspicious of it. I'm just suspicious in terms of the situation in the world right now with Russia and how maybe the escalations with the current beef that's going on is going to be maybe a responsible factor for why all three of those guys from Russia are off the card at the same time all of a sudden. So maybe we'll hear news about an injury, and maybe it is just a coincidence that all of those fighters fell out. But for Umar Nurmagomedov, he's missed his chance. You know what I mean? This was a huge opportunity for him. He's ranked number 11 in the division, and he's yet to beat a ranked opponent. And this was a shot against a top 5 guy. So he was being blessed by a chance to fight Corey Sandhagen. But now I can see him ending up getting like the winner of Song Yudong Rob Font, which I think is actually a more reasonable matchup for him to take on next. So maybe he could take on the winner of Ricky Simone, Chris Gutierrez, and Adrian Yanez versus someone, maybe the winner of Dominic Cruz versus Figueiredo. There's a ton more options to give Umar Nurmagomedov. We just got to find an opponent for Sandhagen, or there's nothing on that Nashville card of worth whatsoever. Let's get it on the main event. Not that there's nothing of worth on that card. There's just nothing main event worthy on that card that can replace Sandhagen's fight. So like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Suts for Du Plessis. But I did say this. As much as that we all had wishful hopes that he's not going to be injured. Hopefully he's not injured and he can fight in 8 weeks. I said this before the fight even happened between him and Whittaker. Strickland's going to get the title shot regardless. Unless Du Plessis sleeps Whittaker with 1 shot in the first round. You know? Like, this was going to happen. You can't expect a contender to turn around 8 weeks later. And not to mention fly over to Australia, which he's going to need a bit of an adjustment for. You know what I mean? It's not like he's a guy training in the Apex and he's got to turn around 8 weeks later to fight in Vegas. That's a different situation. He's going to have to get to Australia in 6 weeks. You know, he probably hasn't even returned to training yet. He's also got to fly back to South Africa, probably on the Monday. So he's already eaten into his training camp there. And then he has to adjust to South Africa time before he can start training again. And then he's not even started training. And then it's like 6 weeks left. And 4 weeks, you got to go to Australia. You know what I mean? Like, it was always tough for Dricus to try and pull this off. We were hoping, we had fingers crossed, but it was not answered. Toodle pip, see you later, goodbye.